Λοιπόν, καλησπέρα σε όλες και όλους και καλώς ήρθατε σε αυτή την διαδικτυακή εκδήλωση του CEMES που αφορά, όπως και προηγούμενες, το ζήτημα της συνοδικότητας, το οποίο το κέντρο μας αυτό το ακαδημαϊκό έτος έχει αναλύσει. Να επιθυμίσω πολύ γρήγορα πως μέχρι τώρα στις διαδικτυακές εκδηλώσεις του CEMES έχουμε ασχοληθεί με τη συνοδικότητα καταρχήν από την οπτική της Ορθόδοξης Εκκλησίας στην Αφρική. Εν συνεχεία το πώς το ζήτημα της συνοδικότητας μαζί με αυτού του πρωτείου αφορά και έχει συζητηθεί στον επίσημο θεολογικό διάλογο Ορθόδοξης και Καθολικής Εκκλησίας. Επίσης, πώς η Καθολική Εκκλησία σήμερα προωθεί τη δική της συνοδική, θα λέγαμε, ανανέωση, μια διαδικασία που έχει ξεκινήσει το 2021 και θα τερματιστεί το 2024, δηλαδή φέτος, τον Οκτώβριο, με την Σύνοδο των Καθολικών Επισκόπων. Είδαμε επίσης τη σχέση πολιτικής και συνοδικότητας, δηλαδή πώς η συνοδικότητα ως εκκλησιαστικός θεσμός από τις απαρχές σχεδόν του χριστιανισμού έχει επηρεαστεί από πολιτικές εργασίες και πώς η εκκλησιαστική συνοδικότητα με τη σειρά της επηρέασε κοινοβουλευτικές δημοκρατικές διαδικασίες. Επομένως, συζητήσαμε πώς μπορεί να υπάρξει και σήμερα μια νέα δημιουργική συνάντηση μεταξύ εκκλησιαστικής συνοδικότητας και πολιτικής. Και τέλος, είδαμε πώς η συνοδικότητα είναι το κατεξοχήν εργαλείο που έχει στη διάθεσή της η Εκκλησία, οι εκκλησίες, για να εκφράσουν αυτή την ποικιλομορφία που υπάρχει στο ιστορικό τους. Δηλαδή πώς η συνοδικότητα συγκεντρώνει δημιουργικά όλα τα διαφορετικά στοιχεία που υπάρχουν εντός μιας συγκεκριμένης εκκληστικής συνάφειας ή στην Εκκλησία γενικά στο σύνολό της. Λοιπόν, σήμερα έχουμε την ιδιαίτερη χαρά και τιμή να έχουμε μαζί μας τον Adalberto Mainardi, ο οποίος είναι μαζί μας από την Αμερική, από τη Νέα Υόρκη, ο οποίος θα μας μιλήσει για μια ειδική, θα λέγαμε, αντίληψη, ορθόδοξη αντίληψη της συνοδικότητας, που είναι γνωστή με το σλαβικό όρο Sobornost. Αν δηλαδή σε γενικές γραμμές οι Ορθόδοξοι κατανοούν τη συνοδικότητα ως μια επισκοπική συνοδικότητα, θα δούμε γιατί η έννοια της Sobornost εκφράζει μια ευρύτερη ίσως συνοδικότητα. Συνήθως ο όρος μένει αμετάφραστος ή όταν μεταφράζεται στις διάφορες γλώσσες, μεταφράζεται ως καθολικότητα, ως συνοδικότητα, ως πληρότητα της Εκκλησίας, ως παγκοσμιότητα της Εκκλησίας. Θα τα δούμε αυτά με το συνομιλητή μας. Ο Adalberto Mainardi είναι υποψήφιος διδάκτορας και ασχολείται με την διαδικασία παραχώρηση αυτοκεφαλείας στην Ορθόδοξη Εκκλησία της Αμερικής. Γι' αυτό το λόγο είναι και στην Αμερική για έρευνα σε σχετικά αρχεία. Είναι μέλος της μοναστικής κοινότητας Τσέλολε και έχει κατά το παρελθόν διοργανώσει τα συνέδρια Ορθόδοξης Πνευματικότητας στην κοινότητα του Μπόζε και μάλιστα έχει επιμεληθεί και κάποιες από τις εκδόσεις της κοινότητας του Μπόζε με τα πρακτικά των συνεδρίων αυτών. So, good evening, welcome all. This is the last before the Orthodox Easter online conference of CEMES on the topic of synodality. This year we have organized a set of conferences on the topic of synodality, and we have so far studied the various aspects of synodality in the Orthodox Church, in the Orthodox Catholic dialogue, in the Catholic Church, the ongoing so-called synodal path of the Catholic Church, which has started in 2021 and will be concluded hopefully in 2024 with the Synod of Bishops. We have also examined the relation between synodality and politics, if there is of any relation and of what kind, and the synodality as a tool to express the diversity that exists in the church as a whole, that exists in its local ecclesial context. So synodality is a topic on which we have focused our research this year, and we are very happy and honored to have today with us Adalberto Mainardi, who is joining us from the US, from New York. He is there for personal research. He is now preparing his doctoral dissertation on the OCA, on the autocephaly of the Orthodox Church of America. So he is in the US for documentation, and we are looking forward very much for the publication of of his research. Adalberto Mainardi is member of the monastic community of Cellule, and in the past he organized the conferences on Orthodox spirituality for the monastery, for the monastic community of Bose in Italy, and he has also edited some of the volumes of these conferences. So that today's topic will be on the Sobornost, which is a particular understanding, as we shall see, of synodality. Usually Orthodox understand synodality as episcopal conciliarity, so in its episcopal dimension. So we will see what Sobornost is about, what the term means, how it can be translated, who introduced it, some applications of this idea in the recent Orthodox history, and then we will have some interesting, I hope, discussion. So, Adalberto, the virtual floor is yours.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Δυστυχώς δεν μπορώ να μιλώ ελληνικά, αλλά θα μιλήσω αγγλικά. So, thank you very much for the presentation and for the invitation to have this talk about Sobornost. This is what I thought to deal with is not just a history, but the idea and how it was realized and how it was not realized in recent time. So we could have this title, Sobornost, Dream and Reality. As you know, Dream and Reality is a famous book of Berdyaev, so is something that we have to look at the idea, which was developed mostly by Russian thinkers at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century, but also the reality of this way of having councils, which is probably a problematic issue, still topic for today reality. So, roughly speaking, my brief presentation will be in two parts: dream, the ideal, the concepts, and reality, how it was realized in the 20th century and how it failed to be realized. If you have a look at a paper of an important Orthodox thinker of the last century, John Meyendorff, he wrote about the Catholicity of the Church in a paper published in the St. Vladimir's Theological Quarterly in 1973. 1973, so is after the Vatican Council. John Meyendorff was one of the observers, is after the autocephaly of the OCA, Orthodox Church in America, 1970, which sparked a division between Moscow Patriarchate and Constantinople, and is nonetheless in the process of the Pan-Orthodox Council. We had already the Rhodes conferences, and theologians, churches were looking for the further meeting of the preparatory conference in Chambézy. So he wrote this article, The Catholicity of the Church, and he said the term Catholicity, I quote, is comparatively recent in origin. The patristic and creedal tradition knows only the adjective Catholic and proclaims our faith in the Catholic Catholic Church, Katholiki Ecclesia. To speak of Catholicity reflects a preoccupation with abstract ideas, while the real object of the theological concern is the Church. End of quotation. So what is this abstract idea of Catholicity? I am speaking of Catholicity and not of Sobornost, but as you know, Sobornost came up as a word in the 19 theology, Russian theology, particularly in Alexis Khomiakov. And he picked up this word in the Slavic translation of the creed, I believe in one Catholic church. In the Slavonic, Old Slavonic translation, Catholic is translated as Sabornaya. The same root, Sabornaya, has the root of Sabor, which is council. So Khomiakov merged the two ideas of Catholic as a Catholic truth, Catholic faith all over the world, and the idea of Sabor, council, where all the people are involved, not only the clergy, not only the bishops, but as in the ecumenical council as an idea, all the people of God is involved. So we can say in Khomiakov ideal, the Sobornost of the Church is an expression of its Catholicity, the truth which is expressed in freedom of expression and in the bound of love. Everybody loves everybody in the Church. They struggle for the truth, and the truth is attained in a conciliar way. And the Catholicity is somewhat identical with the Sobornost of the Church, that is, of his synodality, his way of being in a Sabor, a council. But we have to note a thing, that Khomiakov never used the term Sobornost. You cannot find this word in his works, although this idea is somewhat in his major work, Cercos Adna, the Church is one. The word Sobornost is a substantive, and we heard Meyendorff pointing out that the Church Fathers will not have spoken of Catholicity, Sobornost as an abstract idea, but Katholiki Ecclesia as an adjective. So something which is linked to a concrete reality, a living reality of the Church. The translation of Khomiakov's French works, and in particular in 1860, he wrote a letter to the redaction of l'Union Chrétienne against a speech of Gagarin. Gagarin was a Russian prince. He converted to Catholicism and became Jesuit. And in polemics with this, Khomiakov wrote this lettre au rédacteur de l'Union Chrétienne à l'occasion d'un discours du Père Gagarin, in which he opposed the Orthodox idea of the conciliar way to gaining the truth, to the Catholic ideal of somewhat authoritative. Truth comes from the authority, from above, and not from below. And when this work was translated into Russian by Samarin and Gilierov in the posthumous edition of the works of Khomiakov, they introduced this word Sobornost, conciliarity. And since then, this term have had a good fortune in the Russian Orthodox theologians of the diaspora, and particularly in Sergei Bulgakov. who linked this problematic of conciliarity to the idea of the unity of the church. The church is one because it's a conciliar body, and everybody is involved in the process of recognizing the truth, not only bishops, but also layperson. And in this sense, Bulgakov promoted this idea also at ecumenical level. In 1927, at Lausanne, Bulgakov had a speech. The theme was the ministry and how to understand the unity of the church in the ministry. And the idea in Bulgakov is that the Greek term that corresponds to the idea of gathering in Russian is saborovanie, which has the same root as sabor, as sabornaya. But this term is in fact ecclesia. Ecclesia is the call of all the people, as the gathering of the people, the assembly of those called. And it is at this level, theological and spiritual, at the same time, theological and spiritual, and not only temporal or spatial, not only the space of the assembly, not only the time of the assembly, which are important, of course, but it has also an inner meaning. In this gathering, saborovanie, the universality of the ecclesial being, Cerkovnost, finds its place. Orthodoxy, I quote, has the full possibility of gathering in assembly, sabarovat, soborovat is the Russian word that Bulgakov uses here. Orthodoxy has the possibility of gathering in assembly with non-Orthodox Christians, aiding them in their search for the one and only true ecclesiality, end of quote. So for Bulgakov, the Sobornost is an inner quality of the church, of the Orthodox Church, but it can be extended to other Christians in order to bring them to the truth, aiding them in their search of the one and only true ecclesiality. There is an objective working of the Holy Spirit toward unity that removes it from all calculations of worldly diplomacy and is founded in baptism, in faith in the Lord, in love for him, and in the gospel. Is the true mystical soil, writes Bulgakov, for the union that is sprouting. And in this connection, at Lausanne, Bulgakov introduced the term Sobornost into the ecumenical debate with his speech on ministry at Lausanne. And I quote this passage from his report in Lausanne in 1927. Bulgakov writes, "Rational theology expresses the fundamental essence of church unity in a word for which no other language has an equivalent. Sobornost connotes alike the Catholicity of the church, the integral totality of its being, and its spiritual character as the oneness of its members in faith and love. Its outer aspect as at all points resting on the freely chosen unanimity of its members, the freely chosen unanimity of its members, and lastly, its ecumenical character, which links it to all nations and subordinates to it all local churches. It is the conception of Sobornost, summing up, as it does, the organic nature of the church, which underlies the doctrine of the hierarchy in the Orthodox system. In this way, Bulgakov links the idea of Sobornost, its ecumenicity intended as universality. It touches all the churches, and the search for unity, in which the Orthodox Church is involved as a leading principle, organic principle, in which all are called to contribute to this path for oneness. And the word Sobornost for Bulgakov has the advantage of linking Catholicity, which stress more the truth and the universality, with the process to attain this oneness. That is a considered way, a gathering of all the people. The idea of gathering will be developed in another directions, direction by Afanasiev with the idea of Eucharistic theology, but it was not the concern of Bulgakov at that time. He didn't link enough these two aspects, and it was a little suspicious of Afanasiev's theory. But this idea has a good fortune among ecumenical circles, and even Florovsky used it to characterize the Catholicity. But afterwards, Florovsky was more cautious in employing this term Sobornost, because he felt that it was compromised by Bulgakov's doctrine of sophiology. And in fact, in the Spouse of the Lamb, his ecclesiological treaty, Bulgakov develops the idea of the gathering, connecting it with the idea of the church as a Sophia in the world, in the history, is going towards the Sophia in the eschaton. And a strong critic of the term Sobornost came from Losky, who was, as you know, one of the main critics of sophiology in Bulgakov, which in his article about the second attribute of the church, who was republished in À l'image de Dieu, a book which lists some of his main articles in 30s and 40s. And he says, we do not use this term Sobornost, which means nothing. We have to use just Catholicity, which is the gaining of the truth, the true expression of faith. We don't need this kind of philosophical theory. And he quotes Molière, and he says, you have to speak French if you want to be understood. Il faut que vous parlez français si vous voulez être entendu. Et c'est un boutade, as a sort of way to discharge completely all these speculations which was linked to Komiakov. Although this idea was not completely forgotten, because Komiakov has this very ideal image of the church, which is born in love and freedom, and it goes all together in unanimity towards the truth. And this was strongly criticized by Solovyov, who said that the Slavophiles and the Komiakov were contraposing an ideal church, which didn't exist in the reality, to a real bad church in the Catholic camp in order to make the difference, but was not an equal field. So you cannot contrapose the ideal to the reality if you want to construct a new path. In fact, Komiakov was studied by Catholics in the 30s. Congar was very sensible to Komiakov's ideas. He, in somewhat, criticized Komiakov, but picked up this idea of the one church, the oneness of the church, and he uncovered also some of the sources of Komiakov, which were in the Catholic movement of Tübingen and Adam Möller, which is the symbolica of Möller. So it was a sort of movement in the 19th century. And this idea of the council as an expression of the Catholicity of the church worked also in the Second Vatican Council. But we can have in the 20th century, and this is the beginning of the second part of my presentation, a practice of this Sobornost, not only an ideal, but a practice. When Bulgakov spoke of Sobornost at Lausanne, he was not just speaking about ideas, but he had the experience of the Sabor, the Council of Moscow in 1917, 1918. He was one of the members of this council. And this council managed to traduce, to put in practice this idea, because there were above all laity and clergy, representatives of black clergy and white clergy, that is married and monks, of course the bishops. But it was not just a democratic assembly gathering, because the bishops as a chamber, as a sort of power of vetoes the decision of the council. So the council recognized a special charisma, a special gift of the bishops, which came not from above, not from the elections of the bishops, but from below, not from below, from the elections, from the people, but it came from below, from above. That is, was the charisma of episcopacy given from the Holy Spirit. So the decision of the council were voted by all the assembly, but the bishops could have a voice in those decisions that could not cope with the doctrine, with the traditions on their own judgment. And this was the experience of the Sobornost Bulgakov referred to, in fact, when he was speaking of the gathering of the church. And we have other examples of this kind of conciliarity in the 20th century. We can speak of the 20th century in some ways as the era of conciliarity. We have the Council of 1917, 1918, which unfortunately was interrupted by the Russian revolution, the second revolution. But it continued, for instance, in the experience of the American metropolia, the American part of the Russian Orthodox Church, which was severed from Moscow after the revolution, but they continued this experience of all American Sabor. The council of all the members of the church, laity and clergy, with say with the vetos from bishops during all the 20s, 30s, and up till now. So they say that we are in the tradition of the councils of the Russian Orthodox Church in 1917, 1918. And the American branch of the Russian Orthodox Church said that we are characterized by this Sobornost, this way of Sobornost. We have other kind of Sobornost in practice, although the word is not used in the preparation of the Pan-Orthodox Council, which started in, we can say, in 1930 with the meeting on Mount Athos by Patriarch Photius. That is, this movement towards conciliarity was huge in the Orthodoxy, in the Orthodox Church, although split in many ways, and although persecuted in the Soviet Union. And in the Catholic Church, we have the Vatican Council, which was inspired in some way by these ideas of Sobornost, although only in minor circles that came to be the majority at Vatican Council too. But I would say also the experience of the WCC, World Council of Churches, the movement, the ecumenical movement picked up this idea of being a council of churches, although it has not an ecclesial foundation, or it does not represent itself as a super church. But the way it works are in some way a conciliar way. All are heard, everybody gives his consent, and the process to come to decision, to documents are a conciliar, is a conciliar process. We can find other examples of conciliarity in different degree. And I will finish my presentation now by having a few words about what I could characterize as the crisis of conciliarity. So we have the ideal of Sobornost, as was in the 19th century, Komiakov's Level 5, and picked up by Bulgakov. The free communion of all in the bound of love, first idea. And second, a practical one, a form of decision-making according to revealed truth that involves clergy and laity. These are the two aspects of the idea, theory and practice. We have seen just a few examples of how it worked in some cases. The Sobor of Moscow in 1917-18, the All-American Sobors in the experience of the Orthodox Church in America, the preparation of the Pan-Orthodox Sobor from the 60s up to the 2016, the Council Vatican II, and other form of Sobornost, the WCC, we can say the Council of Churches in Europe, the Assembly of Canonical Bishops in America, other forms in the Protestant world, etc. But we have also a crisis of Sobornost, which is the problem, is the relations between the Sobor and the Primus, who presides the council, who is the authority or the charisma that brings together all the Christians, all the churches, and can help them to find a path to express the truth and the oneness. On the Catholic side, we have an accent on primacy. For instance, in the Synod of Bishops in the Catholic Church, the bishops gather, express their opinion, discuss. It's very important. It's not just a discussion without outcome, but the decision at final out of their discussion is made by the Pope. So the Pope cannot dismiss the discussions. He has to rely on them, but the decisions are his. On the Orthodox side, we have an accent on synodality. But the Pan-Orthodox Council, the process, is based on unanimity. And the risk is that everybody feels entitled to have his own decisions without the others. And for instance, in the case of autocephaly, we do not have still in the Orthodox Church a synodal, a conciliar way to express it. In the case of the American autocephaly in 1970, it was not a conciliar way to grant autocephaly to the Orthodox Church in America, but was the Church of Russia that granted autocephaly to his branch in America. The opposite was in Ukraine, was the Patriarch of Constantinople that granted to his branch in Ukraine the autocephaly. It was not a conciliar process. And we have here a case of crisis, of synodality, of conciliarity. It does not work. It doesn't work. Why? This is one of the problems. And the other problem is the churches are facing urgent and huge issues: war, peace, justice, not only in theory, but unfortunately in a tragic reality. These issues are not just practical ones, but they involve the very core of Christian faith. So Sobornost can be an expression of the Catholicity of the Church, that is an expression of the Catholic faith, of the revealed truth, Jesus Christ, as it was the case in the Ecumenical Council. But the truth sometimes is not clear. We have to discern. We need a process to look, where is the truth? Is true to go to war, or is it not true? Let's gather together and look at the gospel, pray the Holy Spirit, and everybody can brings his charisma, his role, and at the end, perhaps we need somebody who exercises the charisma of unity, the charisma of inverted commas primacy, not to exert power, but to help everybody to get together to the truth, which is not a product of one, of the many, but of a conciliar process of all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Adalberto. That was a very helpful analysis of what Sobornost is about. It is actually about church unity, church being a Catholic reality. It is about sharing the same faith, love, and thus have unanimity in the decision-taking processes. It is about being church. So you gave us a background of how this term appeared, by whom, and what was the concern behind this term, this notion of Sobornost. And thank you also for giving examples of how this term was put into practice in the Council of Moscow of 1917-18, in the Soborn of the Orthodox Church in America, and especially in the WCC, where the consensus decision-taking process has been adopted at the request also of the Orthodox, being the Orthodox a minority within an organism that has Protestant Church as a majority. They asked the consensus as a decision-taking criterion. So it is not something that belongs to the past. It is something that is being applied also to today, at least in the context of WCC, or perhaps in the context of other local church realities. So you also highlighted the reception somehow of this term by the Catholic Church. And yeah, in the Vatican II and also in the post-Vatican II, conciliar proceedings of the Catholic Church. What you said helped me to recall what was one of the ideas in our online lectures from the African Orthodox perspective, that is the need for local churches not only to address issues, but also to discuss issues within their councils, and to against people, the faithful of the church, the clergy, the faithful of the church, in the discussions. So there is a need, a constant need on behalf of many churches, of the people of God, to be involved in the conciliar processes throughout the Orthodox world. So I think it is something that we should not ignore, the idea of Sobornost. We should, of course, discuss it. And I have a couple of questions for you. Now, do you see, now we have seen the Catholic synodal, let's say, process in the Catholic Church. And the first session of the Synod of Bishops in 2023, in October 2023, we had Professor Yassar Testivel speaking about the outcomes of this synod, and he illustrated the fact that it was not only a Synod of Bishops, it was a synod where also laity participated, monastics, bishops, clergy, even ecumenical delegates, fraternal delegates. So is this, according to you, similar or identical to the principle of Sobornost? So is the Catholic Church becoming a Sobor Church? And what that would mean for the exercise of primacy of the bishop? Yes, from the Bishop of Rome. Yeah, thank you.
I think it is a good step towards Sobornost, intended as an expression of the Catholicity of the Church, not just the Pope. And it is important that in the Catholic world, as became increasingly clear, that the Pope is not just the all of the Church, is just one ministry in the Church. And the synod in this way is important, and the involvement of lay people also. What is still lacking, I think, is to transform this process from a consultative body to a decision-making body. I would not plea for just a democratic way, just the majority. Majority cannot be a criteria in the Church. You have plenty of ecumenical council where the truth is stayed in the minority. So the way of the decision-making can be a first part of consultation, and then not just one that makes the decision, but it takes the proposals of all, and they make together the decision. But if the bishops, or maybe the Pope in the Catholic Church, because he has particular charisma for the Catholics, sees that this decision is against the faith, is against the moral, is something that can bring more damage than the usefulness for the Church, he can say, no, this is not the right way. Can we reflect again? And in some ways, we have seen in the democracies decisions which were wrong and were taken by the majority. For instance, Brexit. I mean, everybody wanted Brexit, and now you have polls that say nobody wants Brexit in the UK. But so you see, the majority is not a character of truth. Sometimes the truth is on the minority. So we have all together called for the Spirit to look for the truth. And in this way, what is still wanting and which is under the guide of the Spirit, in which all the charisms are respected. The lay people, the women, theologians, and of the authorities that can guide and say, yes, no, let's try again. I'm not sure. So this is some way to put in practice the idea of Sobornost.
Yeah, Thank you for that. Now, one of the, if I understood correctly, one of the visible manifestations of Sobornost is that of unanimity, which can be also translated as consensus. And that was, as you rightly said, the criterion adopted by the Council of Crete in 2016 to have a consensus in the decisions, in the conciliar deliberations. That, on the one hand, allow the churches to say the same things when adopting documents, but on the other hand, it didn't allow the council to deliberate, to exercise its freedom, its authority that each council has. So some churches which have a somehow more progressive agenda felt unable to express their desires because of the unanimity criterion. So in order to have the unity of all, some deliberations were not adopted. Is this, according to you, one of the limits of the Sobornost? Yes, we can hear all the people of God, we can hear the laity, we can hear monastics, what theologians and bishops say, but on the other hand, we cannot have all people having the same, let's say, the same degree, the same authority when it has to do with decision taking. So,
well, I think here
yeah.
we can see the divide between what I called dream and reality. So when we speak about unanimity, we speak about dream, theory, ideal. And in some way, Khomiakov himself, when he spoke about unanimity in the church, he had in mind something ideal, not the reality of the Russian church of his time, but just what was the theory. So I think unanimity can be the goal, can be the ideal towards we have to strive, but not a procedural element. So not on the plane of the reality. If we start with unanimity, we run the risk to have a coercion of the freedom of the gifts of everybody, and we just work with our presuppositions, and so we not have to put forward unanimity. Let's be unanimous and without discussion. No, let's have discussions free and with disagreements also strong, and then we can decide by majority or by charisma for somebody, and the unanimity can be in the reception after the council, as it was in history. So unanimity is the unity we strive for, is the unity from God. We invoke this unity, and it can be the way we have discussions, not discussion to destroy the other position, but to find together what is at stake, where the truth is on some issues. And in this kind, we can have also disagreements in some ways, but moving forward. So I think it is dangerous to put unanimity on the plane of reality and make it as a process, decision process making. We have to freeze everything. Unanimity is a goal. So let's move forward. If we don't reach unanimity, let's wait, and perhaps we will have another. Well, plenty of questions in it. Churches do not agree on sexuality, marriage, anything at all, and so sort of artificial unanimity, I don't think is Sobornost.
Sure. So thank you for that. So as I yes, as I pointed out at the beginning, Orthodox usually speak about synodality in terms of episcopal conciliarity. Now, Soborn in itself as a dream introduce the reality in which the whole church speaks, the whole church decides, ideally in terms of unanimity. And you mentioned Homiakov, and then you mentioned also briefly Afanasiev, who elaborated the idea of Eucharistic ecclesiology, Eucharistic theology, as a concrete sacramental reality in which the church reveals her Catholic nature. Okay, so one of the critiques that John Zizioulas made to Afanasiev was that he didn't offer the tools for this structural, visible unity of the church, where the role of the bishop is central. Because if you have simply Eucharistic ecclesiology, where the whole people are gathered in the same faith and love, they follow the guidance of the Spirit, you don't have a visible unity, you don't have a structural, ordinary unity, which is guaranteed by the bishops in a synodal context. So if we speak about the ideal of Sobornost, the ideal of Sobornost, what could be the role of the bishop in that case? So we have constructed both in the East and the West a theology that sees bishop as the one who resembles a local community, express the unity of the church that he guides. So in the relations with the other church, so his role is fundamental. So in an ideal exercise of Sobornost, what would be the role of the bishop in his local church and in the relations with the other churches?
Yes, the fundamental role of the bishops is to express the unity of his church. So it is a sort of guide, and he has to listen to his flock because not just they are subordinates, they are people with a charisma, who have a particular charism from God. Everybody is baptized, participates in the Eucharist, and this is the link to the Eucharistic theology. So when we have the Eucharistic, we have one who presides, we have the ministers, we have all the people. Without people, we do not have the Eucharist, we do not have the gathering, we do not have the Sobor, we do not have the church. But the visible expression of the unity of the church is the local bishop. And he is the link with all the other churches. That is the objections of Zizioulas. It's not just a Presbyterianism or a principle of fragmentations. Afanasiev was very an immigration thinker who was in the diaspora, and this is strongly felt in his ecclesiology. But in this case, the bishop is not just a functionary, an officer from the synod or from the pope or from whatever, or from the patriarch. He is the expression of his church and the link with the other church, local churches, dioceses, interchurch relations. And if we break this link between the bishop and his church, we do not have Sobornost. And if we keep this link, we have also Sobornost at the level of synodality of bishops. They are not just ruling representatives of subordinates, but they are expression of the unity of their church, and they have to express this at a universal level.
So in light of what you have just said, is it correct to say that the more we are at the local level, the better Sobornost functions, and the more we go to the universal level, we need a representative synodality? And I say that because one of the institutions that proved to be very flexible and successful in the Orthodox Church was the meetings of the primates, inaugurated in the 90s by the initiative of Patriarch Bartholomew, which proved to be a very flexible organ in the preparation also of the council, among other things. So is it right to think that at the local level, the Sobornost idea works better than at the universal level?
Yes, I think is practically is more feasible, but you don't have to break this link. And so at universal level, you not just have to forget what the constituency in a democratic wording or your flock or the reality of the church, and still at the universal level, the Sabor had to bring the contribution of all the people, the laity, and so to work out some ways. One of the critics that came not from me but from Callisto's word to the Council of Crete was that all bishops were not entitled to speak, but just the debate was blocked by churches. But a single bishop has the charisma to speak for his own and as the representatives of his own church on both levels. So his own charisma and the mandate of his church. This could have enriched the debate also at Crete.
Thank you for that. And very last question. So you mentioned, you mentioned before the example of the OCA, the Orthodox Church in America, and the practice of Sobornost in their case. Is it today still the case? And what are, according to you, the problems in the application of Sobornost in the American Orthodox reality?
Well, in the American Orthodox Church in America is still the case. They have Sabor, All-American Sabor periodically. But what it didn't work was pan-Orthodox conciliarity in America. So every jurisdiction has his own way of deal with problems. There was this idea of the Canonical Assembly of the Organization of Orthodox Canonical Bishops in America was founded by Archbishop Iakovos in 1960, and it lasted until 2009 when it changed to an assembly of all the bishops, in accordance with the idea of a regional assembly of bishops, which was forwarded in Crete. And this is still wanted because in the 60s there was also the idea to bring all the Orthodox jurisdictions together, perhaps under the primacy or the coordination of the representatives of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. There was a project in 1965 drafted by Alexander Schmemann, with this sort of synod, a pan-Orthodox synod in America, but it didn't work. And so when there was a autocephalous church in America to bring about the unity of all Americans, in fact was a unilateral process, was granted by Patriarch of Moscow to his branch, and was just a bilateral agreement. The other were in some way not involved in, and then there was no recognition, polemics, and so on. But in some ways, the conciliar process failed in this case. And then the idea of pan-Orthodox unity was resumed in the 90s at Ligonier in 1994, but in fact was not realized for perhaps the resistance of the mother churches in Europe, and also the cultural differences still present in America. So this problem of the diaspora is still a problem, which I think from outside should be addressed at pan-Orthodox level in a conciliar way, not just left to local conflicts.
Yeah, it's true. So we still have many challenges ahead, both the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. The institution of the autocephaly is one of these. The question of the diaspora that you have just mentioned is another. And then how Orthodox and Catholics could meet synodically and have offer a common witness. vis-a-vis the great challenges of our society. So Adalberto, thank you very much for this discussion. I think it was
Thank
very
you for
helpful,
discussion
very
and
interesting,
invitation.
and we are looking forward to continue this in the future because the topic of synodality is becoming more and more central in the Orthodox Catholic ecumenical discussions. So thank you. Thank you again, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.